All right, so today we're going to continue our look at evolution and what exactly it is. So we've been talking about it for a week now. We have said that evolution is the change in DNA in a population over time. So today we're going to look at that a little bit more and look at how evolution does impact different traits that are present in a population. Right, so this right here says that organisms don't change because the environment changes. The variations already exist within the population, and some of the individuals are just more successful at surviving. And so this again is the idea of survival of the fittest. The organisms that have the best traits get to survive, reproduce, and then therefore pass on the genes that code for those good traits. So if I am an organism that does not have good traits, and I'm not really surviving well in this environment here, that does not mean that I get to change and then suddenly just like grow these great adaptations and traits that help me survive. It doesn't work like that. So this right here is saying that the organism already has that DNA that gives them the good trait. So then they can survive and pass that DNA on to the next generation. And that also means that the DNA that's coding for bad traits kind of gets weeded out through natural selection. Right, this is saying that natural selection works directly on phenotypes, not genotypes. So in order to understand that, we need to remember what those words actually mean. So phenotype, that is what we actually see with our eyes. So if we're looking at an organism, we can see that that bird has a yellow beak, and we can see that it has some blue feathers on its wings. That's a phenotype. Right? Now, genotype, those are the actual genes that are controlling those traits. So we could have a recessive gene, a dominant gene. These are actually those A's, G's, C's, and T's that an organism has inside of its cells that's controlling what we see with our eyes. So you don't actually see the genotype, but you see the phenotype. And so this is important because natural selection, it doesn't look at an organism and scan it and be like, oh, you have a dominant gene, you have a recessive gene here, you're not good enough to survive, you need to die off. But it plays on the phenotypes. So maybe a bird has a recessive gene that makes it have short, stubby wings. Okay, so the bird has this gene that's going to affect its ability to survive. But the environment, let's just say a predator, what eats birds? We're going to say a coyote wants to eat this bird. The coyote doesn't look at the bird and say, oh, you have a recessive gene in that cell right there. I can't eat you because you have that recessive allele. That doesn't work like that. But that coyote can look at the bird and say, ooh, I can see that you have short, stubby wings here. I can tell because you're not really flying very well. So now I can catch you and eat you for dinner, and you taste very good. So predators can't tell what genes its prey has. It can tell that it is very slow, and yes, I'm going to go eat you for lunch. All right, so this skipped something here. Let's go back. All right, so here we go. So there are three different types of selection that we are going to talk about here. So we have stabilizing selection, which is here right now. We have directional selection and disruptive selection. All right, so in all three situations here, all of these three different types of natural selection, you're going to see some sort of curve on this graph. And this one right here, this just normal bell curve here would be normal, okay? So if you just have a normal population here, it would have, so this is down here is representing the range of this trait. And here we're looking at bird beak size. So you would have a range from small beak size up to large beak size. And then over time, if natural selection is occurring on this population, then certain beak sizes would give a certain advantage or disadvantage to the bird. All right, and so then you can look at these graphs and then you can try to see, well, which trait is the best? Which size beak is helping the birds survive and helping them to pass on those genes to the next generation? All right, so stabilizing selection here, this says individuals with the average form of a trait have the highest fitness. So we have, again, our range of beak sizes right here, going from very small to very large. Normally there would be this even distribution here, but over time, if it's stabilizing selection, when I think of stabilizing, you think it's balanced in the middle. So for this type of selection, this average trait here, just this medium average beak size is the best. So over time, the center of this graph is going to start going up because over here on the y-axis, it's saying percent of the population. And so the percent of the population that has that average beak size is going to start going up. So you'll see the top of this bell curve start to stretch up, which means the sides are going to start coming in, which means that less of the birds in the population have that very small beak and that very large beak. So for stabilizing selection again, more birds start to have that average size beak, and less birds start to have that smaller size and that larger size beak. That is stabilizing selection. All right, we also have directional selection. All right, so again, this is showing you that normal distribution here. So you have on the x-axis here, you have that range of, let's just say it's bird beaks again. So you're going from small beak to large beak. Okay, and without natural selection, it's just a normal distribution here. All right, but if it's directional selection, then that means there's going to be a shift in the average beak size in one direction. All right, so if we look down here at this chart, we'll see that it's shifting this way. So it's shifting towards the right if you're looking at it here on film. So what this is saying is that the birds with the biggest beaks are best at surviving. Since the birds with the biggest beaks can survive, they'll be able to reproduce and pass on their genes to the next generation. And then the next generation will have bigger beaks. So this is the directional selection. Over time, there's going to be a shift in that bell curve in one direction. All right, so now there's less birds that have the smaller beaks and more birds that have those bigger beaks. All right, so it's shifting in one direction, directional selection. The last one here is disruptive selection. All right, so in the dotted line here, you can see that normal bell-shaped curve, the normal distribution there. But with disruptive selection, what is happening is, it says individuals with either extreme variation of a trait have greater fitness, or they're more likely to survive. They have greater fitness than individuals with the average form of the trait. Okay, so this is saying the average form, so that middle point here in our graph, is not good at surviving. And so natural selection is going to weed these guys out. So you can see that the numbers of this trait are going down in the population. But you can also see that on the sides here, so if we're thinking about bird beak size again, the smaller beak and the larger beak are going up in numbers. So the birds with small beaks are able to survive. So if this is the amount in the population, it's a very high number now. The medium size beak, not very good. Those went down in numbers. Okay, and now we're going back up again. A lot of birds have those big beaks. So disruptive selection, when you see this bell curve, it's going to have a break in the middle, or you could say it has a disruption in the middle of the bell curve. That's why it's called disruptive selection. All right, this picture here, it shows you the three different types here. All right, so again, we have our normal shaped bell curve here. It says the original population. And for this example, we're looking at mice and fur color. So we're going to range from very light colored to very dark colored fur for these mice. All right, and so now we are going to apply the different types of selection to that original population. All right, so over here it says directional selection. So this means that over time, there's going to be a shift in whichever color is more popular in that population. So here you can see the original population is that solid line, and then the evolved population is the dotted dashed line here. You can see that there was a shift to the darker colored fur. So for some reason, that darker colored fur is a good trait to have. It's an adaptation for those mice. Maybe the dark colored fur are able to camouflage into the bushes better so that the snakes can't find them and eat them. And so over time in this population, the mice with the dark colored fur are able to survive. They can therefore reproduce and pass on their genes for their dark colored fur to the next generation. All right, so this is an example of directional selection. It's moving in one direction. Okay, natural selection is favoring one of the extreme traits, which is the dark colored fur. In the middle here, this is the disruptive selection. All right, so for this example, you can see that there are two different traits that are being favored by natural selection. The very light colored mice and the very dark colored mice. Okay, but that medium shade of brown, for some reason, they are not good at surviving. So maybe just that medium color brown, they're not good at hiding in the snow because they can be seen. They're not good at hiding in the bushes in the springtime. So they're never good at hiding. So they're going to be more likely to get eaten by a snake or some other predator. So over time, that medium color brown mouse is going to go down in numbers. And the white colored mice and these dark colored mice are going to go up in numbers because they are good at surviving. All right, our last example over here, we have stabilizing selection. So remember, when we hear stabilizing, we think, oh, it's balancing around a center point, like a teeter-totter is balancing in the middle. It's stable, just like that. So for this example here, you will see that that medium color brown mouse is the best at surviving. It's very good. So over time, as natural selection is acting on this population, the very light colored mice and the very dark brown colored mice are going to become less in number, but the medium color mice, the medium color brown will go up in number because they're good at surviving. So for this situation here, I would say that the medium color brown mice are the best at camouflaging into their environment. So they're in this field of grass that is just that color brown, and so they are great at camouflaging in and not getting eaten by the predators. All right, so stabilizing selection, you'll see that graph kind of go up in the middle and go down on the sides because the very light mice and the very dark mice are both bad at surviving. So those go down on the sides and it goes up in the middle. All right, so that is it. That goes over the 3 different types of situations we could see in a population that's affected by natural selection. All right, this right here is an example that shows you just disruptive selection. All right, so we have this population of butterflies here. And it's, again, just like the mice, it's arranged in their color. So from very light blue to very dark blue here. All right, over time, you will see that there's a change in that normal distribution of that normal population. Okay, and over time, that middle color butterfly is going down in numbers. Okay, and down here you can see it going down even more. But the sides are going up. So this is saying that those very light colored butterflies and those very dark colored butterflies are great at surviving. But this middle color butterfly, that medium shade of blue, they're not good at surviving. For some reason, they're just not good at it. So through natural selection, they're getting weeded out. They're dying out of the population, which means their genes are leaving the population. So the genes for these 2 colors, the very dark and very light colors, are going up. This one, the middle color, is going down a lot. So it's almost completely gone here. So it was a very bad trait to have. All right, so it is very important that you understand that evolution is when populations are changing over time. It's not an individual. So like I said, I think a few days ago, it's very cold outside. So when I go outside, I can't just like sprout this very thick bear fur because I'm cold. Because individuals don't evolve. Populations evolve. Populations change over time. It says up here, evolution is a change in the genetic makeup of a population over time. There you go. That is our definition. Right, and we have talked about the horse example here already, but this says 50 million years ago, you see this horse, an ancestor of the horse that we know today. And it's much, much smaller than the horses that we do see today. Actually, this horse is smaller than the ones we see today because this is 3 million years ago, and it's still not as big as the horses that we would see today. So over time, the population of horses have evolved to be bigger. All right, here's some vocab words we need to know here, and I think this is our last slide. Oh, one more after this. So gene pool. These are all of the alleles in a population's genotype. All right, so alleles, remember, alleles are different forms of a gene. And so when we are thinking about the gene pool, we're taking every single allele in every individual in the population and putting it into a gene pool. So these warthogs up here are showing you this example. So you can see that for some trait, we'll say fur color here, they can either have a big B for brown fur or a little b for lighter tan fur. And so you can take all of these B's, which are representing alleles, either dominant alleles or recessive alleles, you can kind of gather them all up together, and that entire representation of all of the alleles are considered to be the gene pool for this population of warthogs. All right, the other word up here, allelic frequency, or just allele frequency. So this is the percent of a, going back to our warthogs here, you can either have, you can look at the percentage of the big A's. These are not A's, these are B's. You can take the percentage of the big B alleles, and you can take the percentage of the little b alleles. So you just count up how many big B's there are and divide it by the total to get the percentage. You can do the same thing with the little b's. Count up the number of little b's and then divide it by the total of all of the alleles to get the frequency of the recessive alleles. All right, the last word up here, genetic equilibrium. So this is a population where the allele frequency is not changing over time. So genetic equilibrium, it's in a balance. So there's natural selection's not really changing the allele frequencies on this population because they have great adaptations already. They're not really changing a lot because they're good to go. They're good at surviving already, all of them. Okay, so they're in equilibrium. They're balanced. Okay, but populations that are not in equilibrium will be changing over time. They will be evolving. So this says up here, evolution is any change in the relative frequency of alleles in the gene pool of a population over time. So that again is just another way to say our definition of evolution. So if you look at this population of fish up here, so this population of fish, you will see they have different alleles. They have an A allele and a B allele. And in this population right now, you will see that the frequency of the big A is 60%. The frequency of the big B is 40%. Okay, and now it's saying, it says the word migration up here, pretty small. And so some of these fish are going to leave, right? And once they leave, this is what the population looks like now. Now there's 70% of the A allele and 30% of the B allele. So you would say that this population just evolved. So just because migration happened, which means some of the fish left, the allele frequency changed in the population, which is our definition of evolution. All right, so that's going to be it now. That will complete our note taking for the day. That is it. Thank you.